Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you had it all under control, only for everything to fall apart in the blink of an eye? What happens when you steal your best friend's boyfriend and think you can get away with it? What happens when the consequences of your actions hit harder than you ever imagined? And what if, just when you think it's all over, the revenge that follows leaves you in a mess you can't escape? Sarah thought she was on top of the world. But when she stole Daniel from her best friend, Grace, she was signing up for something that would shake the internet. Because the revenge Grace had in store would change everything. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in her hand, her eyes glued to the screen. The soft hum of the busy city outside filled the air, but her mind was focused on something else. The message that had popped up on her phone had changed everything. Daniel. He had always been there. A constant in her life. But recently, something had changed. He had been looking at her differently. His smiles were warmer, his words softer. And Sarah? Well, she had always liked Daniel, but she had always told herself that he was with Grace, her best friend. That was the rule. But rules were made to be broken, right? Sarah had tried to ignore the pull she felt toward him. She had tried to push down the way her heart raced every time their eyes met, the way his laughter made her feel special. But over time, the attraction became undeniable. It started with small things. A casual conversation after work. A compliment here and there. And then one evening, when Sarah had been feeling particularly lonely, Daniel had asked if she wanted to grab dinner. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a simple meal between friends. But the evening stretched on, and the chemistry between them grew. By the time Sarah returned home that night, her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had kissed Daniel. And for a moment, it felt like all her dreams had come true. But there was a problem. Daniel was Grace's boyfriend. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. The way Daniel's lips had felt against hers, the way his hands had held her close. It was everything she had ever wanted, but she also knew it was wrong. Grace had been her best friend for years. They had shared everything, secrets, laughter, and even the occasional fight. But now, Sarah was the one who had crossed the line. She tried to ignore it. She tried to push away the memory of the night she had spent with Daniel, convincing herself it was just a one-time thing. But deep down, Sarah knew she couldn't go back. The connection she felt with Daniel was real, and every time she saw Grace with him, it only made her want him more. Days passed, and Sarah found herself caught in a tangled web of lies and guilt. Every time she looked at Grace, she saw a friend who trusted her. And yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying to both Grace and herself. The pull of her desire for Daniel was too strong to ignore. Then came the day when Daniel sent her a message. "I can't stop thinking about you, Sarah," the message read. "I know this is wrong, but I can't help it. I want you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The man she had been dreaming about had finally confessed his feelings. But as she read those words, she realized something that hit her like a cold splash of water. Her best friend was about to lose everything because of her. Sarah knew that once the secret was out, there would be no going back. She had crossed a line, and there was no erasing what had happened. But when Daniel insisted that he couldn't live without her, Sarah found herself caught in the whirlwind of his promises. It was a week later when everything fell apart. Sarah had invited Daniel over to her apartment, and once again, they gave in to the attraction between them. They kissed. They touched. They spent the night together. But in the morning, as Sarah watched Daniel slip out of her bed and get dressed, reality hit her hard. What had she done? What had she become? She had stolen her best friend's boyfriend. And the guilt threatened to suffocate her. It wasn't long before Sarah began to feel the weight of her actions. Grace had been her closest friend, and now, she was the one who had betrayed her. But as the days passed, Sarah realized that Grace was still completely unaware of what was happening. That is, until one fateful day when Grace came to visit. Grace knocked on Sarah's door, as she always did when she came over. It was their usual routine. But today, something felt different. Grace's face was pale, her eyes bloodshot as if she hadn't slept in days. "Sarah," Grace began, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you about something. It's about Daniel." Sarah's heart sank. She knew what was coming. She knew that the truth was about to come crashing down on her. But she tried to keep her composure, pretending to be surprised. "What about Daniel?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Grace looked at her with pain in her eyes. "I found something, Sarah. A message. Between you and him." The room seemed to close in on Sarah. The guilt, the fear, it all hit her at once. Grace had discovered their secret. For a moment, there was silence. Then Grace spoke again, this time her voice colder, sharper. "I can't believe you did this. I trusted you. You were my best friend." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as the weight of her actions finally hit her. But it was too late for apologies. Grace had already seen the truth. It didn't take long for Grace to do something Sarah never saw coming. The next day, Grace posted on social media. The post was simple, but the message was clear: betrayal cuts deep, but nothing is worse than losing a friend and a boyfriend to the same person. The post went viral almost immediately. People from all over the city shared it, commented on it, and soon, Sarah's life was turned upside down. She was flooded with messages, most of them accusing her of being a backstabber, a liar, and worse. Grace's post had ignited a firestorm, and Sarah was at the center of it. But the revenge didn't stop there. Grace's next move was to leak private conversations between her and Daniel, conversations where he had confessed his love for Sarah. The internet went wild. Sarah was now the subject of memes, jokes, and cruel comments. Her reputation was in shambles, and she could do nothing to stop it. What had seemed like a victory just days ago was now a nightmare that she couldn't escape. Sarah couldn't escape the chaos. Every day felt like she was drowning deeper in the consequences of her betrayal. Grace's post had sparked an online frenzy, and the world was quick to label her as the villain. The backlash was overwhelming. Her social media accounts were flooded with hate. Messages flooded her inbox, ranging from angry words to more sinister threats. Friends, family, and strangers alike turned their backs on her. But what hit hardest wasn't the hate from people she didn't know, it was the way her closest friends, the ones who had once defended her, now ignored her. The same friends who had stood by her through every messy breakup and drama-filled situation now pretended she didn't exist. Everywhere she went, people stared. Some whispered behind their hands. Others looked at her with disgust. And Sarah, who had once prided herself on her confidence, now felt small and invisible. But there was more. The memes. The viral videos. The jokes. Grace's revenge had only just begun, and Sarah realized with a sickening sense of dread that she had underestimated her friend. Grace, it seemed, had an army of followers willing to help her drag Sarah's name through the mud. Grace was no longer just an angry friend seeking closure, she had become a force, and Sarah was the target. Grace's post had been the spark, but her revenge didn't stop there. Sarah quickly learned that Grace had been playing a dangerous game, one that involved using her influence to ruin Sarah's life completely. It began with her contacting mutual friends. Grace didn't want to just expose Sarah's betrayal, she wanted to make sure Sarah felt every bit of the pain she had caused. Sarah was surprised when Jessica, her old friend from school, called her. "You need to apologize to Grace. You know this is the only way to fix things." Sarah felt a tight knot in her stomach. "It's too late for that," she replied, her voice cracking. She had tried to apologize to Grace, but the friend she had once known was now unreachable. Grace had turned into someone unrecognizable, and Sarah couldn't even begin to understand the depth of her anger. Jessica didn't respond right away. There was silence on the other end of the line, before she spoke again. "She's not just angry with you. She's going after you in ways you don't even understand. People are talking, Sarah. It's not just the post or the memes. It's everything." For the first time, Sarah felt a chill of fear run down her spine. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's world became a nightmare. Grace's revenge had taken another form: harassment. It wasn't just the online attacks anymore. It had spilled over into her real life. One day, as Sarah was walking out of a coffee shop, she was approached by a group of strangers who began shouting insults at her. They were strangers, but they knew everything about her, the details of the affair with Daniel, the messages, even her most private moments. They seemed to know things that only Grace could have shared. It was terrifying. Sarah tried to ignore them, but the anger in their voices was deafening. She couldn't outrun the truth, and now it seemed the whole world knew. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but every time she tried, the words caught in her throat. This wasn't the life she had planned. It wasn't just the betrayal of her best friend that had ruined her, it was the avalanche of humiliation that followed, and Sarah had no control over it. One evening, when Sarah was at her lowest, there was a knock on her door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the constant harassment had made her wary of who it could be. To her surprise, when she opened the door, it wasn't a stranger or an angry mob. It was Daniel. He stood there, looking as disheveled as she felt, his expression filled with guilt and confusion. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice urgent. She blinked in disbelief. "What do you want, Daniel? After everything? After all that's happened, you still want to talk to me?" Daniel stepped inside, his eyes soft with regret. "I can't stop thinking about what we did, about everything. I never meant for it to go this far, but Grace, she's taking this too far. I think she's gone crazy." Sarah frowned, the anger bubbling up again. "Gone crazy? You're the one who kissed me behind her back, Daniel. You're the one who chose me over her." I know, he said quickly. "But Grace isn't just angry, Sarah. She's bent on destroying you. She's making sure you have no way out. And I can't sit by and watch this happen." Sarah stared at him, speechless. Daniel had always been the calm, collected one. The one who could handle anything. But now, he was just as broken as she was. Daniel's warning was the wake-up call Sarah needed. If she was ever going to get out of the mess she had created, she had to do something fast. But she had no idea where to start. The situation was more complicated than she had imagined. With Daniel's help, Sarah made a decision. They would confront Grace. They would take the power out of her hands by revealing the truth to everyone before Grace could do more damage. Sarah knew this wouldn't be easy. Grace had played the victim so convincingly that the world believed her. But Sarah couldn't sit back any longer. She couldn't let Grace ruin her life completely. It all came to a head when Sarah and Daniel decided to confront Grace in public. They went to the one place where Grace would be sure to show up at her favorite cafe. It was packed with people, the perfect setting for a showdown. When Grace saw them walk in, her eyes immediately locked onto Sarah. There was no smile, no greeting. Just cold, seething anger. "You have some nerve, don't you?" Grace spat, her voice low but filled with venom. "You come here, after everything, to talk? After everything you've done?" Sarah stood her ground, taking a deep breath. "I know I messed up, Grace. I know I hurt you. But what you're doing, it's not right." Grace's laugh was bitter. "Not right? You think this is about what's right? No, Sarah. This is about revenge. This is about me getting back what you stole from me." The tension in the room was palpable. People were starting to gather around them, sensing the drama unfolding. But then, Daniel stepped forward. "Grace, you need to stop. You're destroying yourself with this. And I'm done being your puppet." For the first time, Grace looked taken aback. Her anger faltered. "I'm not a puppet, Daniel," she whispered. "You chose her over me. You left me for her. And now I want the world to know what kind of person she really is." The room fell silent as Sarah felt the weight of Grace's words. But she wasn't going to let it end like this. Not without a fight. As the confrontation continued, Sarah had an idea. She knew how Grace operated. She had always been careful with the truth, manipulating it for her own gain. But now, Sarah was going to turn the tables. She pulled out her phone and hit record. "Grace," she said, her voice steady, "you want everyone to know the truth? Fine. Let's show them everything." What Sarah revealed next shook everyone in the cafe. She played a recording of a conversation between Grace and one of her closest friends, where Grace had confessed to planning her revenge. The audio was damning, and for the first time, Grace was exposed. As the truth poured out, Grace's face turned pale. The room erupted into whispers. The power had shifted, and Sarah realized she had finally taken control of her fate.